So we're going to be taking a look at the very first domain, which of course talks about security and risk management. So in this very domain, these are the things we're going to be covering. We're going to talk about the importance of information security management. We shall also describe security policy implementation. Remember, when I was introducing this course, I told you, think of this from a manager's perspective. That's why most of the things you're going to be seeing here will be managerial, policy, advisory, and all of that. Then we shall also take a look at information risk management, then talk about the process of managing personnel security, and then also managing security function. Even though the course is information security, certified information security, note that the people who work in the organization are also part of the assets of the organization. In fact, people even harbor information, sometimes even more than system. Working in the organization alone, the amount of information that you already carry. I don't know if you're following. So that's why it's not just because sometimes people will think that you're coming to do this course, we're going to talk about how to protect information in our servers, in our computers, in our mobile devices, in our network. That's part of it anyway. But it is more or less everything about the organization. Because every asset you have in the organization carries some bits of information. Beyond that too, every asset that you have in the organization is valuable and then also needs to be protected. Because if it gets into the hand of a hacker or a nefarious individual, the person can use it for some purposes that can of course have a harmful effect on the organization. So that's why personnel security is also part of the things we're going to be taking a look at here. We're also going to talk about computer crime and then what we now mean by BCP, Business Continuity Planning Processes. Of course, this is usually referred to this as BCP and DRP. The BCP is Business Continuity Planning, while DRP is a Disaster Recovery Plan, which is, of course, a subset of the Business Continuity Planning process. So, but first, I want us to take a look at this particular case study. I'll read it out, and then we're going to discuss it, and you tell me what you make out of this case study. Kevin Butler, a security administrator in the Network Firewalls division at Nutri Worldwide Inc. He has to prepare for the CISSP exam. He starts his preparation by reading a historical case of a competitor of Nutri Worldwide Inc. The competitor company had failed to understand the importance of information security. The company had planned for business continuity plan, BCP, without continuous involvement of IT. IT security inputs were taken without the team playing an active role. The BCP was weak in the areas of IT security. When the headquarters of the competitor company was hit by a tornado, there was a huge information leak as data protection measures at the time of the natural disaster were not well planned. The IT tried their best to prevent this. The company had to face losses, which led them to file for bankruptcy within a few years. What do you make out of this case study? So this case study basically focuses on the importance of information security and risk management, ensuring that as much as possible, proper implementation of information and risk management within the organization is not negotiable. And it's something that as much as possible, we should put into practice to enable us to ensure information security within the organization. So for us to effectively implement information and risk management, there's what we refer to as the CIA triad. I mean, if you've done anything around security or IT in the last couple of years, I'm sure you've heard the term CIA, not the American CIA agent. So CIA in information security basically stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So these are the three principles that are at the heart of information security, and they are very important for protecting data. So we talk about the triad, so meaning that if you want to implement information security within every organization, ensure that your information security is governed by the CI confidentiality, integrity, as well as availability. For example, let's say your email password. If someone else learns about your email password, they could read about your private emails in the organization. So when we talk about confidentiality, this is like keeping the password safe. That's why we talk about it from confidentiality. You making sure that you keep your password safe so that only you can access the password and only you can access your email. We refer to that as confidentiality. Then also we have what we call integrity. Integrity is basically ensuring that information is accurate and that it has not been tampered with or changed without permission. This is what integrity focuses on. Let's say, for example, you're doing a group project and then someone changes a part of your work without telling you. That's a typical example of what we refer to as integrity issue with regards to information security. So we had a similar situation. I will share our own experience. We had a platform where people who sign up for classes, we usually put them within that particular platform. Everyone had access to the platform. So sometimes you go to the platform, you will see that somebody will say, it's me that brought this participant, who now went and changed the name and put his name as the person that brought the participant. So every now and then, information there were always changing. This one will do this one. So we notice there was a problem with the integrity of the information in that database. So we had to implement access control measures. We had to make sure that as much as possible that the information in that database is accurate, is not being tampered with, or changes being made there arbitrarily, and then that anything that goes in there must be by an authorized person and must follow an authorized process. And this is what integrity focuses on. We can use things like your hash functions, your checksums. These are basically part of the things you can use to ensure integrity of information within the organization. Then availability ensures that information and resources are accessible when they are needed, but then based on the agreed upon parameter. If I don't need that information to do my work, it shouldn't be available to me. But one time I met this guy, he walked into my office and said he wanted to sell me some database. So out of curiosity, I said database. He said yes. So database of who? He said high net worth individuals. I said, okay, how do I know that these people are high net worth individuals? He said that these people have a minimum of 10 million naira balance in their account. So I was just asking him questions to probe to know how he even got all those information and the data he was about to sell to me. So I said, okay, what is the source of the data and how do I prove the genuineness of the data? He said he has a sister who works in the customer care unit in the bank. So that there is a sister that spools those details for him. So the sister will just run a filter. Minimum balance 10 million, and then hit it, and it will start generating, customers' name, their phone numbers, and email addresses. I mean, if that's true, you can see that's an availability issue. The customer service person doesn't need all the customers' database to be able to do their work. They can only query, or they should only be able to query the database on a needs basis. Say, for example, one person brings account number and wants to check his balance. Only then can you enter it, and it will show only you the account balance of that individual, not necessarily the person's email address or even phone number, as the case may be. So it shouldn't be so that you can just, press F10 and see all the account names, balances, and people that you have within the organization. So you can see availability. The customer service person should not be able to debit an account. A teller should be able to debit an account, but maybe not view an account balance. The supervisor should be able to approve a transaction, but not debit an account. This is what we call availability. Ensuring information and resources are available when they are needed based upon agreed parameters. So these three terms, of course, they work in essence, we need to balance them. So if you want to ensure that your information security is top-notch, ensure that they comply with CIA. Make sure that your data is confidential. For example, encrypting it. Ensure that the data is accurate. And that's what we refer to as integrity. And then also accessible on a needs basis. This is now where availability comes in. Please let me know if you have any questions. Note that these three functions are very necessary. And you should balance the three of them. Usually I tell people that, you know how you have a tripod stand. Back in the village, we used to have this stove that then used to stand on three legs. When one of the legs breaks, it becomes an issue because the stove cannot stand again. That's a typical example of what this triad does. Even if one of them is missing, you already have a lot of issues with your information security in the organization. So that's why I mentioned that we should balance the three of them. And that's what would ensure proper implementation of information security within the organization. So we're going to take a look at these definitions now, one after the other, which of course I've explained even before now. Now, the first one talks about confidentiality. And the principle of confidentiality asserts that information and functions can be accessed only by authorized parties. That's what we mean by confidentiality. Only by authorized persons. So only authorized persons should be able to access information within the organization. Example of a confidential information can be military secrets. Military secrets should be treated as confidential. Sometimes you get to hear that Nigerian military was ambushed, and a lot of them, unfortunately, usually get killed. But it's not like all those people, Boko Haram, ISIS, and the rest of them that usually carry out those attacks. It's not like they have one mirror that they're using to check. Maybe in the morning, they will do, did you go to go? And then Nigerian military will show in the mirror and they will see their navigation. And no, it is a breach in confidentiality. Either somebody within is passing the information and telling the enemy that, hey, military is passing through this route. Or, hey, this is what the military, this is an attack the military is preparing. And then in turn, they will now form an ambush. It could also even be the villagers who maybe they now see the movement of the military, they will now serve as informant. And so, again, that's basically what we mean by military secrets should be confidential. Then also the concept of what we refer to as integrity. This is defined that information and functions can be added, altered, or removed only by authorized people and means. That's what integrity here says. Remember, when we're talking about integrity, it is to ensure accuracy of data. So if you have a situation where anybody can go and alter data in the database, remove, add, change, you have a very big problem. I've shared our own experience. I also had a similar case where an organization was facing sales challenges, because most organizations these days do. But this is a multinational. So they were having issues because they were not having a lot of sales like they used to. So they now said, okay, if this is not happening, let's even fall back to our previous customers, or not even our previous, because they had this database for leads. Let's fall back to this, our leads, and start remarketing them, calling them, to be able to find out if they will be interested in our product. So when they started calling those leads, to be someone in Zamfara who hasn't even heard about the company, or maybe someone in Maiduguri, or someone in one Yobe state, they'll just be saying, Assalamu alaikum, or the number doesn't exist. So, I mean, it was usually one of the issues or one case like that or the other. So because of that, we had a session. So they said they needed to do database cleanup. The first question we asked was, how was this database even generated? And they said that they gave their salespeople target that every day they must generate 10 leads. So that they've been doing that for a couple of years now. So the next question we asked, do we have a way of validating those leads? There was no way of validating it. So at the end of work on a daily basis, the salespeople just enter 10 leads in the database, only for us on further inquiries to find out that those people were just entering spurious data. By the end of the day, they will formulate a name, maybe Obaling Joseph Sunday. Then give that name a very powerful email address, obalingjoseph@gmail.com. And then they now put together 11 digits number, and give as phone number. If you even look at some of the phone numbers, you could readily tell, because they were not any of those codes for the service providers that we had in Nigeria. Again, you can see integrity issue. Data was being entered by those who were not authorized, and then there was also no standardized process for entering data in the database. And that led to integrity issue. The data was not accurate, then also was not something that can be substantiated. Think about the bank, or even your own organization, or whatever it is. Let's say you guys have sales figure and it's not captured correctly. Or let's say the number of transactions is not captured correctly. All of these things are typical examples of what we refer to as integrity issues. Then the concept of availability. So availability principle basically asserts that systems and functions and data must be available on demand according to agreed upon parameters. Yes, I should be able to access information from a system, but not just every information, based on agreed upon parameters. What are the agreed upon parameters? My level in the organization. That will determine how much information I'm able to access. The role in the organization. Then also, what exactly do I need the information for? These are typical examples of what we refer to as availability. Is there any questions so far? So in order to be able to ensure proper security controls, proper implementation of the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, there is now need for us to implement proper security controls. Talk about proper security controls, measures that we now need to put in place in order to ensure safeguard of information systems. This is what we refer to as security controls. So for the purpose of the exam, security control, there are three major security control categories. They are administrative controls, technical controls, and physical controls. We usually use the term ATP to designate these three security control categories: administrative control, technical control, and physical control, ATP. So based on what you're seeing in this diagram now, when we talk about administrative control, what do you think administrative control will include? What do you think, what are administrative controls from the perspective of information security? Anybody? When you say administration, administrative control.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Yes, administrative controls refers to policies, guidelines, and rules on, while technical controls are logical, what we call, sometimes we call logical controls, like controlling using passwords, biometrics, and others.
Thank you so much for that. So he gave us a very good definition for administrative as well as technical controls. What about physical control? Can any of us, the rest of us, talk about physical security control?
Yes, physical measures, physical controls are those physical measures that are put in place to restrict access. These include things like access barriers or barrier gates, walk-through devices, and others.
You're right, absolutely. So these are the three broad categories of security controls that you typically have within the organization. So remember, I said that security controls, they are protections, more or less measures, protections that are put in place to safeguard information security in the organization. And remember, I told you that these controls are meant to enhance the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information system security. Administrative control, you have already defined it: policies, procedures, guidelines. Key thing you need to note about administrative controls, they are usually created by the management. So this is usually coming from the top, and then they will now be enforced by the employees. So all your company policies in the organization where you work in, for example, they make part of what we refer to as your administrative control. Let's say your email policy, your quality policy, information security policy. These are all part of your administrative security controls. Then technical controls, like you mentioned, the using of technology. That's why it's called technical. Using technology to protect systems and data. For example, things like your firewalls, your encryption, your antivirus software, all of these things are part of your technical control. So I'm sure your organization has firewalls they put in place in order to block unauthorized access to their network. That's a typical example of what you refer to as what? Technical security control. Then, of course, physical controls to protect your physical infrastructure. This, of course, makes sure that people can't physically access systems or sensitive data in areas in the organization without due permission. I'm sure your organization, maybe you have things like keys, you have like man traps or turnstile, for example, okay? All of these are typical examples of what we call physical controls: fencing, security guards, gates, locks, doors. And these make up what we call physical security. So these controls are quite necessary because together they create a comprehensive defensive system in order to enable you mitigate risk that, of course, may happen to the organization. And that's part of the reason why implementing these various categories of controls are necessary. Aside from that, one of your major responsibilities as a security professional is also ensure, because as an organization, usually I tell people that organizations, it's more like a tripartite arrangement. In essence, running an organization is usually like a two-way process. Every organization has customers that they supply or they attend to. As a training provider, the participants are our customers. As a bank, the participants, or rather the customers, are the depositors. As an insurance company, the customers are those who buy insurance. As a telecommunication service provider, the customers are the subscribers. So these are a telecommunication service provider, so you have your customers. But then to be able to attend to your customers, you now have your suppliers. Because what we're going to be using to attend to our customers will not fall from heaven. This will also come from other people. So in a nutshell, we're also customers to other people. MTN, for example, Huawei is their supplier. Nokia, Ericsson. All of these are suppliers to MTN. Well, then they are now able to use all their equipment, as Microsoft Azure and the rest of them, to provide us with data services, call services, and all the other communication services that we require. So you can see that arrangement. As a security professional, your work does not end just protecting information within the organization or communication and network security, just like you saw in one of those domains. You also need to put measures in place to ensure that information is also protected with your suppliers, making sure that as much as possible, your suppliers also keep to their own terms of information security. And then what do they do with the information that they get from you? All of these things are things that you're putting into consideration here. In order to be able to accomplish all of that and to protect your supply chain, you will need a couple of things, which of course would include having what we call an SLA, service level agreement. Remember when I was drawing that diagram, I told you you have a supplier, which is a provider, and then you now have the service recipient, in this case, the client, which I said could be an MTN or could be any other organization. So the document that now helps to be able to determine the terms of engagement is now what we refer to as an SLA, service level agreement. So this is basically a contract between a service provider and a supplier that outlines the expected level of services. And that's one key thing that the service level agreement helps us to do. So this document will specify the services that a provider will deliver, the standards of performance, the metrics that is going to be used to measure such services. Aside from that, the security implications as well as measures. For example, security incident response, security alert delivery, security investigation, policy as well as procedural reviews. All of these are typical examples of what is usually captured within a service level agreement. And this is, of course, undertaken in order to protect us from some of these risks that may be associated with our suppliers or outsourcing some part of our service delivery. And what are some of those risks? Loss of confidential information. To give your information to an organization that you don't know if they have a way of protecting the information. And that's part of the reason why it's important to ensure that you take a look at these risks and put measures in place to be able to effectively mitigate them. Then, aside from that, accountability. You need to also ensure that the third party adheres to the organization's standards and practices. That's what we call accountability. So it's not a free-for-all thing. If you're working with us, we have our own standard, and you must have to abide by it. I'm sure you've dealt with some organizations, and maybe before they want to do anything with you, they first of all want to ask you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Then aside from that, they also ask you if you have certain certification, let's say PCI, Payment Card Industry Certification, or maybe ISO certifications, for example. The reason, because they want you to be accountable and adhere to the organization's standards. Then also compliance. Don't also forget that if you have a situation where a third party has compliance issues, or because of a third party usage, you're now beginning to have compliance issue as the case may be. That's something you don't want to do. So that's part of the reason why, as much as possible, because if you have a third party managing some aspects of your businesses or operations, compliance issue might arise if they don't follow relevant procedures in dealing with all those data or information. So to be able to deal with those risks, there's now what we call secure outsourcing. Things or measures you can take in order to effectively secure some of your processes that are being handled by third parties. You can do what we call on-site assessment. You should have a scheduled arrangement where specific intervals, we can come to your site to come and audit, do what we call second-party audit. Don't forget, there are 3 types of audit. We have first-party audit, which is also known as internal audit. That is, we auditing ourselves. Then a second-party audit, which is now what we call is a type of external audit. Second-party audit is we auditing an organization that we do business with to be sure that they are in compliance with standard and to ensure accountability. Another measure we can take to secure outsourcing is do document exchange. This is where contract comes in. Then also policy as well as process review. You want to see the policy and processes of that particular organization and then also make sure that nothing in their policy actually contravenes legal as well as regulatory requirements. All of these are measures that you can, of course, take in order to protect some of your outsourced functions or some of your activities that are being carried out by other agencies or parties that are handling some of your processes. Beyond these third parties, certain services may require you going beyond the shores of your own country. Cloud services, most times, are now you basically going beyond your own shores. Most cloud service providers, AWS, Microsoft, and a host of them, most of them don't even reside in Nigeria. So the question is, how do they treat your data? That's a typical example of what we call offshoring. Or some of your processes are handled in India, maybe your customer service department, or some of your functions are handled from another country, Vietnam. This is a typical example of what we refer to as offshoring. So offshoring basically also throws up certain risks or challenges. But then as much as possible, it is necessary that we put measures in place to enable us to effectively mitigate the risk that comes with offshore, so that privacy and security or regulatory issues are, of course, put into consideration. Because when you offshore your data to a different country, the law that is governing privacy and data protection in the country that is receiving the data might be different from the one in your own country. Say, for example, in the US, maybe we need to compulsorily delete some data after 5 years, but then it's not the same in your own country of origin. So maybe after 6 years now, you have an issue and they're asking you for certain data, maybe court or something, and you can't find it because the company that is responsible for for storing your data has deleted it in line with their own policy. So you can see. So that's part of the reason why, as much as possible, we need to ensure that we put proper contract in place. Contract is one of the key things that would ensure that regulations as well as laws governing privacy are followed even beyond your country's jurisdiction. So what that means is, if your own is saying 7 years, before you decide to go into contract with that organization for transferring and storing your data, please let them know within your own contract that this is the duration minimum that we want the data to be in the database, so that you don't have a situation where such incidents could arise. Those are measures you can, of course, take in order to also be able to protect your sensitive data and then also guard against some of the risks that may come with what we refer to as offshore. So we are taking a look at key concepts, the CIA triad. We're also taking a look at security controls, categories, administrative, technical, as well as physical. We're also taking a look at measures to safeguard our supply chain, as well as certain functions that are carried out by third parties, especially for our organization. Please let me know if you have any questions so far. So one of the key parts of our conversation that we discussed earlier was administrative controls. Remember, I said administrative security control has to do to a large extent with policy, and then procedures, as well as standards. So the question now is, what is the best practice when it comes to policy development or when it comes to security policies? So when we talk about policy, policy is an overall broad statement produced by senior management that dictates the role of security within the organization. These are key things you should put into consideration when developing security policy. Remember, I told you, look at things from a manager's perspective. So from a security policy standpoint, your policy must be generic, non-technical, and easily understood. What do you understand from that statement? Policy must be generic, non-technical, and easily understood.
So it means that policy should be simple and clear to understand without technical ambiguity.
Awesome. Don't use Patrick Obayangbo's English. You know that one that used to speak. Don't want to use that kind of grammar to develop your security policy. It must also integrate security into all business processes and functions. What does that mean? What does this mean?
That every aspect of the business or every aspect of the operations has to be covered by the policy, and who does what, including who does what, sorry.
Sounds good. A chain is as strong as its weakest link. Most times in trainings like this, you see IT people, and then I ask them, where are the others? They'll say, it's not IT training. I'll say, no, it's not IT training. is an information security training, and everyone is expected to be information security conscious. Remember the statement I made earlier that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. Most times, compromises in the organization may not come from IT. It might be that girl that is sitting at the reception. What do you want to print? Abeg, it's very important. Abeg, make I just print, then brings out the flash drive and gives her, I say, it's inside that flash drive. She plugs it to our system. Flash drive is infected. The virus enters the system from the flash drive because all of you are connected to the same network, travels through the network, and infects other systems in that network. You can see it came from somebody in the front desk who doesn't even understand information security. Or somebody sends a mail. You've won 1 million naira. Click on this link to access. Not knowing it's a ransomware. That guy that is in operations department is always complaining that the salary is not enough. He sees the link and then clicks, shuts down his system, and the ransomware goes through the network and shuts down other systems. The next thing you're seeing on your screen is to be able to access your computer and your data, pay 1 Bitcoin, and they put the Bitcoin address. Again, it's coming from somebody who we least expected will need this type of training. So that's why we're saying that you must integrate security into all business processes and functions. And you can't do security in one aspect and leave the other aspects, because that one that you left is most likely where the problem will emanate from. Policy must be reviewed and modified periodically or as the company changes. Why do you guys think this particular point is important? Why do you guys think this point is important?
For me, it is important because it is necessary to integrate or bring in any update periodically, maybe as a result of lesson learned from previous incidents or new developments in the security industry.
Totally agree. Most people only see a need to develop all these things. Maybe when they are pursuing one certification or the other, maybe they've bidded for one contract, and then the organization has now said 27,001 certified. And then they quickly now go and start putting together security policy with others. And once they've bidded for the contract, they dump everything in the proverbial shelf where it now begins to gather dust. Until maybe after like 5 years again, similar thing happens. Some other person demands for. They now go and bring, and you discover that things that you have there are no longer relevant. Threats evolve on a daily basis. I mean, it's not the kind of threats that were faced 5 years ago that we are facing today, and as we speak, new ones are still evolving. So our policy should always be updated to align with that. Aside from that, it must also support the vision and mission of the organization. So we need to see a way that the policy would help us in achieving our overall organization objective. A security policy that we don't see how it ties back to overall organization's objective. That's why we mentioned that it has to support the vision as well as the mission of the organization. So there are different types of policies. Policies can be regulatory policy. These are policies that come from regulatory bodies. So they ensure that we keep to standard. For example, HIPAA in the US, PCI DSS, or advisory policy. And these are, of course, policies that advises employees or users on the type of behaviors that they should follow. For example, policy for handling medical or personal information. Could also have information policy, which of course informs the employees of certain key topics. This is more like informatory. They give information to employees on specific things, especially as it pertains to the organization. All of this would help us as much as possible in order to make sure that we enhance information security within the organization, and not just that, we also enhance compliance in the organization. Remember, I talked about a type of policy, which is regulatory policy, which of course would ensure that you meet regulatory requirements. And meeting regulatory requirements is absolutely necessary, because if you don't, it becomes a regulatory or a legal issue. And you don't want to have a problem with the government or the regulator. One day I was driving around Lagos, these area boys. That's how in traffic, at some point, I was even feeling scared. This guy should not breaking into. So he now spoke something in Yoruba. I'm not very fluent, or I don't understand Yoruba very well, even though I'm still trying to. So I told him, what does that mean? What he said, according to him, was that after God, na government, after government, na me. So I say, hey, I don't understand. So, yeah, of course, I just gave him something, and almost immediately he moved to the next car and continued with more like his rehearsed speech. But then I took a cue from what he said, after God and government. That is literally true, because government wields a lot of power. Recently, you've had the case of Didi in the US. And then you also hear a lot of high-profile cases, Enron back in the years. These are cases, these are organizations, multi-billion-dollar organizations. Ant Group, Alibaba in China. So what the Chinese government literally did with Jack Ma and the rest of them. So you can see how powerful government can be. They don't want to have issues with them. And that's one of the reasons why regulatory policies, compliance is very important. I usually tell people that compliance is good business, because if you think you are circumventing compliance, one day when the law catches up with the person, all those benefits that you think you got from cutting short or cutting corners, especially regulatory and compliance, they will be undone. So this is part of the reason why there is need for you as an organization to ensure compliance. Compliance will help you to protect critical information, enforce controls, understand the requirements for protecting the organization information. Aside from that, protect shareholders' interest. Like I mentioned, good controls make good business sense. Compliance is good business. If tomorrow the person appears on TV that there's a breach, compliance breach, almost immediately all your contractors, all your customers, some of your clients, they might not want to do anything with you again. Immediately, if you notice, especially in the Western world, once this thing happens, you see everybody, they begin to dissociate themselves from you almost immediately. In case of Didi that I just used as an example, the Harvard University has pulled the doctorate that they gave the guy and even returned his donation. All the sponsors, all ones are already pulling the plugs and all of that. So you can see compliance is very important. So one way to ensure compliance is by carrying out constant audits. I remember I mentioned you can do your internal audit, you checking yourself, and then do an external audit, third-party audit, bringing in an independent entity to come and, of course, check, and then be able to give you verdicts. This will help you ensure that as much as possible, how well are you meeting legal as well as regulatory requirements. Is there any questions so far? Are we good? So I want to call for a 15-minute break. So we can take a stretch break for 15 minutes, and then we'll resume again at exactly 12:15, roughly 18 minutes. So let's resume at 12:15. And when we come back, we shall dive into what we refer to as cybercrime. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Remember, before we went on break, we were taking a look at security and risk management. And then under security and risk management, we are taking a look at key things, the CIA triad, that enables us for effective implementation of security within the organization. Remember, CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, as well as availability. We also took a look at other key concepts that we have, which of course included concepts around information security controls categories, where we mentioned administrative controls, technical, as well as physical security controls. Then when I had to talk about how to ensure that we protect our supply chain, as well as information that is handled by third parties, outsourced agents, as well as offshore services. We talked about the need to use service level agreements, then also contracts. And aside from that, other key things, for example, on the site assessment. Then finally, we talked about the need for compliance. So when it comes to law, we have what we refer to as cybercrime. Cybercrime, basically, if you notice, is a combination of two terms. One is cyber, and then the other one is crime. Anything about cyber, of course, is a crime that has to do with computers. So that's why we said that it's offense that are committed against individuals or groups of individuals with a criminal motive to intentionally harm the reputation of the victim, cause physical or mental health to the victim directly or indirectly using modern telecommunication networks such as internet, through chat rooms, emails, notice boards, groups, mobile phones, SMS, MMS, and a host of others. Good. So this is basically what we mean when we talk about cybercrime. Cybercrime has become increasingly popular, especially with the proliferation of mobile phones, and then not just proliferation of mobile phones, but then also they have become increasingly popular with the availability of internet. I visited my friend that was some time ago. This was about 2 or 3 years ago. So I noticed that the school had a Wi-Fi. So I was like, wow, you guys have a Wi-Fi, because he works in the statistics department. He said, yes, that a non-governmental organization came and installed Wi-Fi in the school. And some philanthropists actually put that together as part of their giving back. I was like, wow, that's a very nice initiative. So like there was free Wi-Fi. Once you come, you'll see the Wi-Fi and you can connect once you have the password. So he gave me the password, I connected. It was pretty okay and very fast too. So I used it and it was good. So only for about a month later, I came back again because I needed to do something in that same school. So I met my friend. First of all, I noticed the Wi-Fi was no more there. So I asked him, how far now without your Wi-Fi? Is it down or something? So that's how the guys started laughing. He said, which down? And the Wi-Fi that they had already removed. I said, removed? What happened? Said that when they did that implementation, that almost from the day of the implementation, they've been having one issue or the other. A series of scams, a series of students were not using it to do, even those who were not into it before. Now, because they've seen free Wi-Fi, the school had to now have them to switch off the Wi-Fi. So what I'm trying to make is, of course, that was a very good initiative, but most times for things like this, because they are not readily available, it might, of course, or rather, it leads to, or in the case of the example I cited, predominance in cybercrime. Because people are now feeling awoof and they can now use it to commit certain criminal offenses. So beyond cybercrime, we also have what we call computer crimes. Don't forget, cybercrimes is beyond computer crimes. You can use computers, you can use mobile phones, you can use via telecommunication networks, intranet, and a host of others. But then computer crimes are basically crimes that involves a computer. And that's what we refer to as computer crimes. So you need to have a computer and then a network to be able to do what we call computer crimes. They include things like cracking, copyright infringement, child pornography, as well as child grooming. So when it comes to CISSP gives us 3 categories of computer crimes. And the 3 categories of computer crimes are, we have computer-assisted crimes, then we have computers as the target of crimes, then we have computers incidental to the crime. So computer-assisted crimes are criminal activities carried out using computers as mere tools and are not specific to the computers. So in a nutshell, we use computer to carry out such a criminal act. That's what we call computer-assisted crimes. Your fraud, distributed denial of service attacks, counterfeit, theft. 80% of all criminal investigations include evidence that is digital in nature. These are what constitutes computer-assisted crime. You use computer to commit that crime. Then there's what we now call computer as target of crime. In this case, computer is the target. Don't forget, in the first case, computer is the medium that we're using to commit the crime. But in computer as a target of crime, here we're targeting a computer or a server. So that's why we say that computers are the target of the crimes for the criminal activities. So they focus on the computer, on the system, servers, networks, and the data stored in this system. Maybe hacking to exploit data or to mine data. For example, things like sniffing, denial of service attacks, password attacks, viruses, digital identity theft, computer hacking. So these crimes target information systems as well as their underlying architecture. Then we now have computers incidental to the crimes. So computers incidental to the crimes are those crimes where the computer is related or incidental to the crime, meaning that the crime could occur with or without the use of computers. That's what we refer to as computer incidental to the crime. I want us to take a look at this scenario and you let me know what type of computer crime this scenario refers to. Towards the end of the last year, Users at Nutri Worldwide Inc. reported unusual activities on their systems. The IT security team had identified that some cyber criminals had targeted Skype, Facebook, and Windows users on the organization computers by using multiple black hole activities. For completing the attack, the black hole exploits required users to open links of compromised websites hosting malicious files that will be downloaded and executed. These files contained a JavaScript which infected the machines. Jacobs, General Manager IT Security, instructed Kevin to scan all the systems for malicious software and block Facebook and Skype on all corporate machines until further notice. What type of computer crime is referred to in the scenario?
This is a computer-assisted crime.
Is this computer-assisted crime?
Yes. That's because computer is the tool that's being used to commit the crime here. Without the computer, they won't be able to commit this crime here.
Fair enough. Does anybody think otherwise?
Well, I think it's computer as target.
This is computer as target.
Because
it was targeted. Go ahead.
Because the resources, all the softwares are directly on the computer. And the objective is to get into the computer and get the data in them or information in them.
You're right, absolutely. Computer as a target is correct. So a couple of legal systems are now put in place. And as a CISSP candidate, it's also necessary you understand these legal systems. So legal systems provide a framework that determines how the country develops laws pertaining to information security. So any combination of basic law system form the basis for modern legal systems.
I don't contact you severally, no day before. Last week.
So some of the basic legal systems that we have include, we have civil law, we also have common law, and then we now have religious law. So when we talk about civil law has to do with disputes that relate to disagreements, contract disagreements, for example. These are basically what we refer to as civil law. For example, trespassing, battery, negligence, products liability. All of these make up example of what we refer to as civil law. So let's say, for example, if an organization violates a data protection law, the court can, of course, fine the organization. That's a typical example of civil law. Then we now talk about common law. These are laws that, of course, are used to punish misbehaviors or what we call in legal terms misdemeanor. For example, you have what we refer to as criminal law. You have what we refer to as maybe fraud. If someone commits fraud, for example, or maybe cybersecurity breach, you may have a situation where the person can be criminally liable. The person can go to jail, depending on the extent of the damage. The person can spend some time in jail. Then also we now have religious laws. These are laws that are based on religious beliefs and texts of a particular religion. For example, the Sharia law, all of these are typical examples of what we call religious laws. So for a company, it is expected that you need to understand the relevant laws that operate within your jurisdiction and make sure that you follow the civil as well as common law in order to be able to set up proper contracts and ensure compliance with data protection laws. These are part of the things you need to put into consideration. So if we go ahead to talk about some of these things, remember I talked about common law. So this is basically precedence-based law. Precedence determined. When we talk about precedence, we're basically saying that most times judgment is based on previous judgments that have been given for such offense. Let's say murder, for example. Previous judgment was life imprisonment. So if that's the case, most times, that's why in common law, I'm sure you've heard lawyers, they'll not say in case of this versus this. So they use that as a precedence for decision making. Like I said, it's to, punish misdemeanor or, breaking of the law. Then civil law has to do with wrongdoings against individuals or companies that may result in damages or losses. Things around disputes, trespassing, negligence, and all of that. So this one is based on based on rule. It is rule based. That's why, if you remember, when offshoring, we're talking about outsourcing or third party, we mentioned that to be able to protect against the risk that comes with some of those functions being carried out by external parties, you need what we call documents, which is now what we call contracts, service level agreements, and all of that. Because those relationships are usually covered under civil law. So that when there is an issue, it's not going to be precedence-based. It's going to be based on what did the contract say. That's why we call it rule-based. So we're not going to be referring to ExxonMobil versus Owando case. No. Because their own contract might be different from our own contract. So that's why we say it is rule-based. It's based on exactly what you have in the agreement. That's why it includes contract law, tort law, property law, employment law, corporate law. So you can see all of these are laws that has to do with something which related to document exchange and what you have within your agreement. There are also customary laws. These are, of course, laws based on tradition. That's what we refer to as customary laws. And then we now have religious law, which, of course, I've mentioned earlier on. So this is basically a faith-based law. For example, the Sharia, which of course is guided by the Quran as well as the Sunnah. So if you have a combination of these laws, we now refer to it as mixed law. And that's basically what mixed law refers to. Let's take a look at this scenario. You let me know under which type of law this falls under, whether it's common law, civil law, customary, or religious. Kevin Butler was studying major legal systems which are followed throughout the world. Curiously, he thought of going through the archives of legal cases involving Notary Worldwide Inc. He came across one of the recent cases where Notary Worldwide Inc. lost a legal battle against one of its partner organizations. The dispute was regarding breach of some clause of the partner agreement. The partner filed a lawsuit against Notary Worldwide Inc. for violation of its rights and claimed a compensation of $2 million. Under which type of law did the partner file the lawsuit?
This should be under civil law.
This is civil. You're right, absolutely. Beyond that, we also have what we call intellectual property. I'm sure we all know what intellectual property is. What's intellectual property? Let me ask you. What's intellectual property? Intellectual property. Yes, sir.
It has to do with protecting tangible and intangible properties like inventions, discoveries, and others.
Do you
protect
think
the
they
right
need,
to
yeah, do you
properties.
think they need protection?
Yes, of course. They need protections because it prevents copyright and misuse of the right to that ownership of that particular property.
That's basically what intellectual property law goes out to protect. There are two major categories of intellectual property law. We have industrial property as well as copyright. Industrial property protects things like inventions, patents, trademarks, industrial designs, and all of that. Copyright protects things like novels, poems, playwrights, and a host of others. If we now take a look at the various types of intellectual property law that we have patent. So as a system security professional, a CISSP candidate, for the purpose of the exam, please, you need to also understand these laws. Patent grants the owner a legally enforceable right to exclude others from practicing the invention. The time period is for 20 years. So that's why sometimes you hear this thing is patented. And that's basically what we refer to as patent. This thing is patented. So patent simply means that only one person can, or only the inventor or the person who discovers this can, of course, practice it. One day there was this woman that discovered malaria treatments that we're using nowadays. I think she won this Nobel laureate for her discovery. So she was the one that discovered this artemether lumefantrine. And when they were interviewing her on CNN, the interviewer now asked her, why did you not patent it? And she said that her goal is to save lives. Because if she had patented it, all these pharmaceutical companies that are now making artemether lumefantrine, calling it now different names, they would not have been able to practice that invention. And if it was not open source or made available like she did, maybe, of course, you and I might still be relying on chloroquine, which, of course, we were told that malaria parasite developed resistance to, or it might be very pricey to get. So the idea of patent is basically you're excluding others at least for a minimum of 20 years. Then we have trademarks. Trademark laws are to protect the goodwill a merchant or a vendor invests in his product. That's what we refer to as trademark. Say, for example, your name, color, symbols. One funny incident back in the years, I read it on Naira Land. It's a very popular forum in Nigeria. So the guy came on Naira Land, opened a particular thread, and was ranting. So he even posted some of the communications he had from the legal department of Facebook. And what happened? He started his own social media site, but then he now called it Facebook. So Facebook now wrote him that this your site can confuse people to think that they are dealing with Facebook, that you should bring down the site. So the guy now came to Naira Land and was ranting that it's because Nigerian government no get mouth, that American company is threatening a Nigerian company. That can a Nigerian company threaten an American company? And to make matter worse, the color for his own Facebook is also blue. And I think it's the same hex code with Facebook blue color. So the only difference is now in the logo. I think Facebook logo is F. I don't know whether it's capital F or small f, but I know that those Abba clothes that you buy, where they will now put Prada, they might now write so maybe Drapper or something. Just something, that's what the guy basically tried to. So he was hoping to get sympathy and maybe support from other Nigerians. But trust Nigerians now, Naira Land can be a very funny one. People started criticizing the guy and said, if you want to do your own, you know, go, come on, this is. Some people were not saying Facebook will call Boko Haram me. So to cut a long story short, one day I went to the Facebook site. I discovered it was no more there. I don't know whether it was Facebook that put it down or the guy put it down or whatever. But I mean, that's a typical example of trademark infringement. Then aside from that, we also have what we call copyright. So copyright covers the expression of ideas. For example, artistic properties, such as maybe writing, recording databases or computer programs. So the minimum of 50 years after the creator's death or 70 years in all. The book Things Fall Apart. Nobody can have copyright to that book except Chinua Achebe, and it can only be in the public domain 50 years after Chinua Achebe's death or 70 years from the date of publication of that particular wonderful novel. That's basically what copyright protects. Then there are now trade secrets. Trade secrets laws, they protect certain types of information that, if unauthorized disclosure, can cause great damage to the organization. Secrets like the secret formula of Coca-Cola, or a new form of mathematics, or a new source code of a program, all of these can be covered in what we refer to as trade secrets. Kevin Butler was studying about intellectual property laws as part of his preparation for CISSP. While studying the topic, he remembered a recent case in which his organization had successfully won a lawsuit against a competitor organization. The case in question was regarding the use of Nutri Worldwide Inc.'s product name for a similar kind of its product by the competitor organization. The court gave a verdict in favor of Nutri Worldwide Inc., and the opposite party had to pay heavy fine. Under which type of law was the lawsuit filed? Under which type of law?
It will be trademark.
Trademark is correct. So remember, we're talking about security and risk management, and we're taking a look at mostly security. Next, we're going to now delve into the topic of risk management. Before we do that, certain key definitions are quite important. So as a CISSP candidate.
Sorry, before you proceed.
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
Concerning patent, is it renewable after the expiration of 20 years? Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Joseph?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you right now. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yes, I was asking about the patent. When it expires, can it be renewed?
That's for patent for your inventions, right? Yes, patents can actually be renewed. There's actually a process for maintaining the validity of a patent. So usually there's like a periodic renewal or maintenance fee that you need to pay.
Okay.
So remember, we're talking about key concepts that we normally use in risk. First, there are certain things we need to define. We have what we refer to as an asset. So asset is any information, software, hardware, equipment that is utilized for critical business function. The simplest definition of an asset is anything of value. Then we also have the concept of vulnerability. The simplest definition of vulnerability is weakness. And that's what we call vulnerability. Then we have threat. Threat is any potential danger to systems or information. That's what we call a threat. Anything that can cause harm is what we call a threat. Then there's threat agent. Any entity that takes advantage of a vulnerability is what we call a threat agent. If, for example, our system does not have antivirus, that's vulnerability. A threat is that it could, of course, be infected by virus. Somebody brings in a flash drive that contains a virus, that flash drive is the threat agent. That's what is the medium that carries the threat. And threat is now anything that can cause harm. Risk is the likelihood of a threat agent taking advantage of a weakness or vulnerability and resulting in business impact. That's what we refer to as risk, likelihood. While exposure is an instance of being exposed to losses from a threat. Loss that we may likely suffer from a threat is what we call exposure. Then we have countermeasures and safeguards. Countermeasures or safeguards are put in place in order to mitigate potential risk. Safeguards are preemptive. In other words, they are preventive. So when you talk about safeguard, they are measures that you take to prevent a potential risk. While countermeasures are corrective, they are usually reactive. Measures that you take in the event a particular risk happens. So, but most times we normally talk about them together. So that's why most times you're going to be hearing countermeasure or safeguard, countermeasure or safeguard. Note, while one is corrective, the other one is preventive. So these are now the stages we go through in information risk management. So first, we need to determine, we say that the information risk management is the process of identifying and assessing the risk, reducing it to an acceptable level, implementing the right mechanisms to maintain it at that level. The steps will include determining the threat event, then the impact of the threat, determining the threat frequency, recognition of the uncertainty, then the risk mitigation, the annualized cost, as well as the cost-benefit analysis. We'll take a look at all of these as we journey along, so you see how they are all computed. But first, let's take a look at this. While studying the information risk management process, Kevin made notes on the security definitions based on examples from his day-to-day work as follows. Assets, servers, and systems of the company. Vulnerability, weak rule in firewall. Threat, hacking network servers. Threat agent, hacker. Risk, loss of critical organization data. Exposure, 25% of data loss, which is unencrypted. What will the risk management process achieve? All these things that Kevin is doing, what will it achieve on the last?
The risk management process will just reduce the exposure, the impacts on an organization.
I totally agree.
That's the risk impact.
You're right, absolutely. So that's why we mentioned that some of the goals of carrying out risk analysis, one would include to identify the organizational assets and their values. Because the major part of our risk analysis process is to determine the value of the asset. Because that will help us effectively analyze the risk. Then, of course, balance the cost of countermeasures and the impact of the threat. In a situation where you're implementing a countermeasure that is even more expensive than the asset. So what's the need? Then also measure probability and impact of latent threats so that we can adequately prepare for it and identify vulnerabilities and threats. So those are some of the goals that typically you have, especially when it comes to risk analysis. And if you're doing your risk analysis, one very first step is to determine the value of the asset, which is one of the first goals I mentioned here. And to determine the value of an asset, these are key things that you need to put into consideration that can help you determine how valuable an asset is to you. The cost to acquire or develop the asset. Obviously, that's number one thing. In fact, most times when we talk about value, this is where people's mind go. How much that thing costs? That's one way to determine the value of that asset. But then there are also other things that can help us in determining the value of the asset. They will also include things like cost to maintain and protect the asset. We've been protecting this thing over a couple of years, including the cost of acquisition. All of that makes up the lifetime cost of the asset. So you can see it adds to the value of the asset. The value of the asset to owners and users Yes. I had a roommate then in my school. This guy, I don't know if you guys ever encountered somebody like that, but the guy is always forming posh, acting like he's from a very rich family. So that was the notion he gave me in the first, when we first came, and I discovered that he was my roommate because we were 4 in the room. So the guy was acting like, so now how it is. So because of that, we now felt that these things don't mean a thing to him. So this morning he said, Valim, that your toothpaste. You use my toothpaste. Tomorrow, I just said, where's that your soap? I'll buy soap if I'm coming back. That's the Dimie quickly use. So that's how it was just using our supplies. But at the same time, he's not making it look as if he's begging for it. In fact, he so much covered it in such a way that we even felt he's doing us a favor using our supplies. He always talks about how he's from a very rich family, how he has been to Disney, and how he has done this and done that, and how if he's coming back the next day, he's going to buy 1 dozen of this one. But we didn't see any of those things. There was one day that one of my roommates called our attention to it and said, come on, this guy, they use hope for us. We better start locking our things up and stop giving him anything. I said, CJ, yes, that's the thing that it might be a common thing to you, but for me, it's very valuable. Not just because of the price of soap, but I can't count the number of times that I needed to go to lecture. The previous day, I was very sure I had some soap remaining, only for me to go and check my dish and discover that no soap is there. Then investigation will reveal that you're the one that used it. That morning, I will now be perturbed. I'll be totally disorganized because I'll start running around the hostel looking for where to buy soap or looking for who will borrow me soap, or before you know it, it spoils my day. So it's not just about how much I bought it, but it means a lot to me because it helps me to start my day with certainty. That's what we mean by value of asset to owner. It might not be, one day, one lady I did a class for, so she forgot her pen. And do you know that because they came in from Abuja to do the class in Lagos, so she forgot her pen. She was already in Abuja when she called that, hey, there's one pen, no. I said, yes, we saw the pen, but we don't know the owner. She said, and it has been passed down from one generation to the other, that she doesn't want to misplace the pen. They had to package that pen, sent it via DHL to Abuja. She paid for everything. I'm sure the cost of all of that may even be more than the value of the pen itself. But then it has a special significance for her. Aside from that, other things you can use to determine the value of an asset is the value of the asset to adversaries. Sometimes it might not be very valuable to you, but if your adversary lays hands on it, they've struck a gold mine. They are able to identify or gather a whole lot of information about you, which is basically what they might be looking for. You see that system that you guys are using, and then it's no more good. And then you just go and casually dispose it. And then somebody now lays hand on the hard disk. You might think, after all, it's a waste of what need do we have for it anymore. You see your adversary. The person has hit jackpot. It could also be value of intellectual property that went into developing the information. Remember, I asked you guys, is intellectual property something of value? You said yes. Should it be protected? You said yes. It could also be price others are willing to pay for the asset or cost to replace it. Cost to replace it. My wife has been disturbing me. Honey, I think you need to buy me a new car. The one small car that we have been managing. So when I price cars, and I saw the prices of cars nowadays, I knew that the cost to replace that car, at least, was not within my reach. So I had to call my mechanic and sat him down. I said, what will it take to bring this car up to par? So he told me what to do. And it was not even up to like 1/4 of the cost of replacing the vehicle. So we agreed a date, we fixed a date, he came, took the car, and when he brought back the car, it was looking almost like a new one. And we've been using it since then. So again, you can see the car is valuable to me. I'm no longer looking at how much I bought it that first time, but how much will it cost to replace? That's now what is making that car to be very valuable to me, even as we speak. It could also include liability if the asset is compromised. Maybe if anything happens, so you could have legal issues and all of that, or usefulness and role of the asset in the organization. Maybe that thing is at the heart of our function. Maybe it's a server. It might be an old Cisco server, but most of the things we do are tied around it. So even disrupting it for 1 minute can give rise to a whole lot of outages. It's still very valuable to us. We'll still use it that way. So all of these things are part of what determines how valuable an asset is to you. So that's why in the course of your risk analysis, one of the first things you need to do is you determine the asset as well as information value. Told you things you can use to determine the value of the asset. Then based on that, you now carry out risk analysis and then you do your countermeasure selection. Remember, I told you countermeasure is usually reactive. So this is now the risk analysis. Remember, I talked about asset valuation, things to put into consideration to value your asset. These are now steps to doing your risk analysis. So in doing risk analysis, we compute what we call our SLE. SLE simply means single loss expectancy, single loss of expectancy. An organization's loss from a single threat. If this threat or risk occurs, what will be the value of the loss that we're going to experience? That's what we call single loss expectancy. And it is measured by the asset value multiplied by the exposure factor. The asset value multiplied by the exposure factor. You see that my car, let's say the car is valued at 3 million. And then probability that the car would, let's say, catch fire, for example, is 10%. So my single loss expectancy will be 3 million times 10%. That's basically how you calculate your SL. 3 million times 0.1, which is, of course, the equivalent of 10%, with 300,000. That's my single loss expectancy. Then we now have what we refer to as analyzed loss expectancy. How many times would there be a possibility that fire could occur in this vehicle in 1 year? We call that ARO, annual rate of occurrence. So if, for example, the number of times that this could happen, maybe during the festivities, maybe during Christmas when the children are throwing fireworks, and then maybe during Easter when they are throwing fireworks as well. So twice every year is when I see that this potential may likely happen. So my annual loss expectancy will now be this single loss expectancy multiplied by the annual rate of occurrence, which will give me 600,000. This is what I call my annualized loss expectancy, my ALE. That's what we refer to as annualized loss expectancy. So the idea is this: if I'm putting in place any countermeasure, that's why you talk about cost-benefit analysis. So the countermeasure should be such that it can help me prevent much money, but the countermeasure shouldn't be as expensive as this. If the countermeasure is now more than this, I would rather wait for it to happen. So you see why you do your ALE and your SLE, because it will help you to do a cost-benefit analysis and do a countermeasure measurement, anything like that. So now determine how much in terms of countermeasures that you need to put in place. Another example could be this. Let's say you have a probability that fire will destroy a server with data encrypted in the organization. The server costs $6,000. That's the asset value. Then, of course, the EF, remember I talked about our exposure factor. So the exposure factor is 50%. The ARO, annual rate of occurrence, that is the frequency, is what we now refer to as 10% in this case. So if we want to calculate our SLE, single loss expectancy, remember, it is your asset value multiplied by the exposure factor. That's our SLE. While our annual loss expectancy is now our ARO multiplied by our SLE, which is exactly what we see here. So these are measures that we put in place or analysis that we do when we talk about carrying out risk analysis.
Sorry, Mr. Allen.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have a question. Yes, so in terms of the ARO, you say it's 10%. How do you determine the 10% in this scenario?
Good question. So you make a use of relevant data, use previous occurrences. That's why you notice when I use the car example, I used period when there are usually fireworks. If, for example, the risk is, you can take a look at the previous years and say, what's the frequency of flooding in Lagos? That can give you an idea of your ARO. Or you take a look at history of fire outbreaks, and you can now ask, what's the frequency and what's the probability? All of these are measures or data you can analyze to be able to determine your ARO. So if we don't put a countermeasure, what is the chance that this may happen? if, for example, you're having a mobile app for a bank, no countermeasures, what's the probability that they'll be hacking? That one is almost 100% because it's a financial product. So you can see that one will have a very high exposure factor as well as a very high, because hackers will literally sleep on that app for as long as it exists and keep trying to see if they can break through. You can see ARO is high, exposure factor is high. So with that, you have a very high ALE. And that's why you need to put all measures in place. That's why you see banks, they spend a lot of money to protect that single application. You see them running multiple data centers, then having around the clock monitoring, as well as a lot of security measures and standards, and then also carrying out relevant audits, the penetration testing always, because of that sensitivity. So you can see previous information, the value of the asset itself, know how a single drop of sugar, honey attracts bees. The value will help you know how attractive will this thing be to attackers. All of these things are measures you can put in place. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So this risk analysis that we have done is known as quantitative risk analysis. Quantitative risk analysis is basically an analysis that we do where we quantify the risk in monetary value in terms of dollar and naira. Call it quantitative analysis. It's usually more difficult. You notice all the calculations that we have been doing, but then also you have qualitative analysis. Qualitative analysis are more subjective. You can just use, is it high, medium, or low? What's the probability that this will happen? Medium. Probability that this one may happen, high. Qualitative analysis can also help you to take quick decisions, but may not be as detailed as what we did in quantitative analysis. And remember, we said quantitative analysis would help us to be able to now determine countermeasures that we might now need to implement. So to be able to determine the value of your countermeasure, we call it value of safeguards to the company, is your analyze your ALE, that is before implementation of the safeguard. In other words, analyze loss expectancy before we implemented the safeguard minus annualized loss expectancy after implementing the safeguard minus annual cost of the safeguard. That's exactly what will give you the value of your safeguard or your countermeasure. So if, for example, our analyzed loss expectancy of a threat for fire bringing down our server prior to implementing it is $10,000, then our ALE after implementing the safeguard is now $2,000. The annual cost of maintenance and operation of the safeguard is $500. So the value of the safeguard to the company is the 10,000 minus 2,000 minus 500. This is how valuable, in other words, we're basically spending $500 to get a value of 7,500 in terms of protection. That's exactly what this helps us to be able to determine in terms of the value of our safeguard. When it now comes to responding to your risk, there are certain responses you may choose to adopt. Responses, of course, can include, you can choose to transfer the risk. Transfer the risk simply means, okay, giving it to another person or another party to handle. For example, insurance. So taking up insurance is a very good way to transfer a risk. You can also avoid the risk. That is, don't do anything that contains that risk. In our servers, disable all open ports. In your computer, remove all portions for USB or any connection to any external device. That's a typical example of avoidance measures. You're here, so you take away whatever process that could potentially give rise to that particular risk. That's what we call avoidance. Then there's now what we call reduce. Reduce is take measures to see how you can reduce the exposure factor or the probability that the risk may happen. Then accept is you do nothing, just wait for it to happen. So you want to move from point A to point B. Between point A and point B, there is a very large pothole, which is what we call the threat. To get to point B, what are your options? You may decide to take another route that will lead to point B. Maybe longer, but it's a smooth road. One day, one man came to my office. He was driving GLE. So after we finished discussing, he was now asking me, how will he go back? Because our road is actually undergoing construction. So I'm now telling him, why not go through this? Is there no straight road? So I said, yes, there's a straight path, but that is very far. He said, I'll take it. I said, why? He said that he has lost his car before when he was passing all this coral. And ever since then, he was attacked. And ever since then, he doesn't risk it again. That's a typical example of avoidance. So it has totally decided to avoid that risk. That's why I told you avoid is you take away whatever contains that particular threat. Take it away. That's what we call avoid. Or transfer. This person can choose to now, enter a public transport. Who will now go through all this? But if anything happens, it's the headache of the doubtful guy or the Uber, or whatever it is. You can see he transferred it to another party. Or reduce. He can go and see how he can cover this pothole. Or he gets there, he drives slowly and take all necessary precautions to reduce the probability and the impact. That's what we call reduce. Or he can also accept. Remember when I bought my, because I started my career in the bank, in the IT, then they used to pay. The next thing is, what will you use the money to do? So as a kid, I've always loved big cars. Even my toys then were very big. So the first thing that came to my mind is to go and buy a Jeep. That's why I went and bought a Nissan Xterra, 2006 model. When I bought that car, I felt invincible. I felt that there's no road or pothole that can hold me back. No matter how big or how bad it is. Any pothole I just see, I'll just put head. So that's how the thing I was just doing, and the thing was working. The car, too, it was a very strong car. It was not until one day I got to one pothole like that. Water, because it rained that day, so water filled the place. These cars were not moving. But I didn't know why cars were not moving. Because I now felt that, is it not pothole? And my car would jump in and jump out. The next thing I just said was, like the two tires fell into the ditch. Then the front of the car now shifted and hit the other end of the pothole. So before I knew it, the back tire was raised. It was as if there was a very deep ditch there. And that's how the tire hung in the air. And everybody was just looking at me. So, God, you see place where everybody know they go, you want to go put head. So I've been doing a lot of acceptance, especially for such threats, until that particular incident in my life. And ever since then, I'm not that naive or stupid again. So all of these are basically ways you can, of course, handle risk, especially as it pertains to responses to risk management. Is there any questions so far? So the last part of our discussion, we now include what we refer to as business continuity planning. Remember, I talked about that. This is basically how we can build resilience in the organization. Business continuity is how we can continue operations even when there's an unintended or unexpected event. There's nothing as bad as somebody comes to your organization and service is not available or our system is down. Business continuity simply means if one asset fails, another one kicks in and nobody even knows that anything is happening, especially customers. So your business continuity is to help you build resilience and ensure that business continues as normal. And the key areas of business continuity should include the lives of your employees. When I was introducing this, remember I talked about here, protection of lives. That's the number one priority of business continuity because the people are your greatest asset. One lady that I met one time, she told me that the reason why she left her job, because she worked at a bank too. She said she was with cash movement. So that day they were taking cash to Badagry. And between that Lagos-Badagry side, there was one bush area, broke down. Then they used all those pickup vans as bullion vans. They said that's how the vehicle broke down. No? So she now called her boss that they have an issue here, that they should send reinforcement because said they have only 2 mobile police guys. So they were visibly scared that they could attack them and then hurt them. And maybe because people might want to steal the money. But then when he told the boss, and the first question the boss asked is, I hope our money is safe. I'm asking of my own life. You're about the money. He said, your guy just told her, come, all these things you're doing, nothing should happen to bank's money. I don't want to hear any story. And cut the phone. In reinforcement, they didn't send. She said, luckily for them, they saw a mechanic who was able to fix the vehicle, and then they proceeded. She said that was effectively the day she quit, even though it took her about a year later to put it to paper and pen. Well, I knew maybe where the boss was coming from because there are chances that the person might not even be telling the truth. Or maybe the person wants to steal money or something. I knew exactly where the boss was coming from. But at the same time, you need to also make it seem that the people matter to you. It's not just about the company's property as the case may be. So as a security professional, the lives of employees, as well as those within the facility, should be paramount to you. So your business continuity plan should first of all prioritize those entities. Then how to minimize disruption, stop it from escalating, restore business operation, bringing it back to what it is, and then also prevent financial losses. These are specific things that your business continuity plan addresses. So there are different types of events that can lead to disruptions, which of course will now lead to kicking of your business continuity plan. It could be natural disaster, for example, earthquake, for example, flooding, for example, tornadoes. It could be human-made, strike. It could also be outright sabotage. We had a case where this organization, it was a one-man's business. The IT security, the IT systems admin, apparently the guy fell apart with the CEO the previous night. So the CEO got angry and fired the guy over the phone at night, but didn't tell anybody. So the next day, the IT guy, the systems admin, the guy resumed as normal. Nobody knew what transpired between him and the CEO. Went to the data center, changed all the configuration, and disappeared. When work wanted to start, all their processes and functions were down. Nobody could access any application. Nobody could literally do anything. Where is this guy now? Where is John? Where is John? But we saw him this morning. Now, where is John? Call his number. The number you're calling is unavailable. Escalator, okay, CEO, what's happening now? We're trying to reach John. I said, with John. John now, our assistants are, okay, you saw John? Yes, now I found him. Okay, John was in the office this morning. Yeah? To come and do what? I think what we are suspecting is true. John has come and intentionally disrupted our applications. That's sabotage. They said he took the invitation of someone from Cisco. He even paid the guy's flight down to Nigeria with a lot of money before they were able to restore back their systems. So you can see, that's a typical example of a disruptive event, man-made. Could also be environmental, like fire, explosion, or whatever the case is. So your business continuity planning should have measures that you need to put in place to prevent disasters. That's before. What we need to do in the event of disaster, that's during. And then also after a disaster, that's also what we call after. These are part of the things that should form a core part of your BCP. So my question is, why do you think business continuity planning is important? Can anybody tell why you consider BCP as an important aspect of every organization's business? Do you think it's important at all?
Yeah. BCP is very important because if BCP is not made available or put in place, if there are no plans made in place in case of let's say a disaster or something, or let's say there's a downtime on the network and they don't have a backup. Every hour, or let's say the downtime lasted for a long period of time and they don't have backup to continue the day's operation, the company might lose a lot of money. So it's very important that BCP is put in place.
I totally agree 100%. These mobile app transactions we're doing, I didn't realize how much, no wonder Nigerian banks, I don't know, but no matter how the economy is, they'll still be declaring billions of dollars of naira in profit. So one time I had the opportunity to take a look at one bank's book. You can see the money they made from mobile transactions. In fact, they said they even prefer mobile transactions to cards. Because not only it doesn't require, manufacturing of anything, it's also very easy. And then, those 10 naira, this one they collect. It adds up a whole lot in a day. So your app, down for one day, calculate how much you would have lost. Down for 1 week. You can only just quantify what the rate of loss would be. So that's why your BCP is absolutely necessary, because of these potential losses, which we cannot quantify. So a couple of them, basically, is part of what we have here. It could be the last line of defense for any organization against threat. It also ensures all planning has been considered and reduces the risk faced by the organization. If you want to implement a BCP, these are steps that you can take as advised by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST 800. Project initiation and scoping. You need to clearly determine what does your BCP cover. Then you do your business impact analysis to be able to determine which areas in the business have the highest impact, because those should also be the most secured and protected part of the business. Then consider preventive controls, safeguards. Of course, prevention is always better than cure. Then countermeasures, recovery strategies, basically. Then now put all of them in a plan, test it, train people on it, and then constantly maintain it. Always make it relevant, revisit it. You see this guy always going back to check on it. And that's what we refer to as the phases in your BCP, or your business continuity planning. Beyond that, part of the things you also need to put into consideration is now your security awareness training. I gave you an instance earlier where I told you a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So there's a need for constant training, retraining, especially of employees. The reason is because the bad people don't sleep. Risk doesn't stop. So we should also keep creating awareness. Not in the religious fair, we say watch and pray. Didn't just say pray, but the bad guys, we need to constantly keep watch. Don't be caught unawares. Unboxing was wrestling. They were doing a pre-match analysis. Paul Logan, yeah. I used to be a YouTuber, now a WWE superstar. He won the American Championship. Of course, although I know most things in wrestling are scripted. So he was supposed to fight a major superstar, because those superstars have been there years now. The YouTuber that's not even a professional wrestling. You now came, and in the course of the interview, the other professional wrestler was saying that it will crush him at this one. Well, what do you know about wrestling? You'd have been making. And Paul Logan said, well, you may be right, I may be new in wrestling, but that it takes only one blow that connects to win a championship. Well, as funny as that may sound, when you look at it from a security perspective, all the previous attempts might be failing. It takes, that's why they don't give up. And that's why people who steal Nigeria's money, they're very patient. If they lose election now, they can wait till another 4 years, lose again, wait till another 4 years. Guys, because you know why? If they enter just for one, I don't want to say 1 year, for 1 month, what they will hit in that position. So one guy was telling me the other day that we should do, I should help him craft a proposal for one training like that, for one ministry that I don't want to mention. So I did the proposal I sent. Normal way training now, just with like our own money. So when the guy now finished it and sent it back to me, the training fee I was seeing, the guy is planning to send to the ministry, because according to him, he said he has a connection. 6.5 billion, not million, 6.5 billion. I tell the guy, is it? He will just take it out of charge. But I shouldn't ask them. I told the guy, that this one is too big for me to be involved in. So that's why, remember, like I keep saying, security should be a continuous thing. So that's why the awareness is key, because it just takes one blow. It just takes one staff to make one mistake, and the whole organization is compromised. So that's why you need to help your team to always understand the importance of security, to also understand the expected responsibilities, acceptable behaviors, and non-compliance consequences, to modify employees' behaviors as well as attitude towards security, and then also implement security in a better way. So in summary, these are the things we took a look at in today's session. We talked about information security, why it's very important. We also talked about information security policy as a guide. Then also we talked about information risk management and the processes involved, and then how to implement countermeasures. Then aside from that, we'll talk about responses to risk, then also computer crimes, and finally we ended it up with business continuity planning. Is there any question on all that we have discussed in today's session?
Thank you very much, Mr. Obari.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, my question is on the PCP.
Okay.
Yes, can we develop a PCP in isolation? For example, say I want to do PCP for the IT operations, right?
Good question. So if you remember when I showed you the BCP planning phases, and see the first stage is the scoping. Scope means boundary. So it means you can actually define the boundary for your BCP. You have BCP for a process, BCP for a product, BCP for a unit, a department, and also have BCP for an organization. So yes, you actually define the scope of your business continuity planning and focus on that particular scope. Does that make sense? Is there any other question? All right. So when we meet again tomorrow, we're going to take a look at the next domain, which of course is asset security. Thank you all for your time. I'll send you the recorded videos once it's ready, and I can't wait to meet you again tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this particular session has been very informative for you. Don't forget to like, comment, as well as share this particular video. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also sign up as a member of this particular channel and you will be getting a whole lot of benefit as a member. You can also decide to sign up for any of our upcoming CISSP training or system security course, whether it is CISSP or CISA or CISM or CompTIA Security Plus. We are there to help you cover and most importantly, help you get certified at one sitting once you take the exam. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about asset security. Thank you so much and see you in the next lesson.